If you're an estate agent curious about going self-employed, or just want to hear how someone built a 20-year agency and then pivoted into a bold new model, this episode is just for you. Ian Wilkinson shares the highs, the hard lessons, and why being a self-employed estate agent might just be the future of estate agency. Hope you enjoy it. Ian, thank you for joining us on the podcast. So, for those who haven't seen you on social media, talk us through how did you first get into the estate agency world?
Yeah, pleasure, Chris. Thanks for having me on. So I've been in estate agency since I was 18, and I guess it's just a job I just sort of fancied when I was, I used to see the sort of back then see the estate agents in like convertible BMWs and stuff in like the late 90s, and thought, yeah, that's what I want to do. So started working for a big corporate back in the day, and then just sort of filtered my way through to then opening my own agency in 2005. So it's been a bit of a long journey.
And how have you seen the market sort of peaks and troughs? And do you think you've sort of the harder markets in that time, so sort of early 90s and sort of the 2007, 80 sort of direction, do you reckon those sort of marketplaces, do you reckon they shape agents going forward to kind of help them in their future career quite a lot?
Yeah, I really do. So around the sort of, the crash in the late sort of 2007, 2008. So we'd been in business for a couple of years. So we're a new business and we're just starting to get established. And then obviously everything just sort of fell down around us. So we started trading at a place where the market was just booming. You could get 120% mortgages. So you're putting houses on and sell them. And we were like, okay, this is it, we'll smash it. And then obviously everything collapsed. So it made us revisit. So at that point, it made us go into lettings, because obviously the sales market was dead. So it does make you assess what you're doing and just not go through the motions. I remember going to a conference actually, and they showed us a Heinz ketchup bottle, and at the time Heinz had turned the bottle upside down, and they were like, this is what estate agents need to do, is turn the bottle upside down and do something different. So yeah, I think those tough markets shape you much more than the busier markets.
Yeah, I remember the 2007 days. I remember people phoning up and saying, "Yeah, I know you valued my property for £250,000. Can you try, 275, 280?" I'm like, "Yeah, why not?" And it would sell in like a day. And you think to myself, "My goodness, like this will never end. Like it's like the market only goes up, sort of thing." So, yes, as all good things come to an end eventually. So, what was the catalyst from you going sort of in the corporate world through to actually, I want to do this myself? Was there any particular thing that happened, or what sort of did you get a certain stage of life and you thought, bugger it, I've had enough of working for someone else? What happened there?
Bit of a combination of things, really. Like I absolutely loved the job, and I remember sort of when I worked in the corporate office, like asking the branch manager if I could, how do you do valuations, and who takes the pictures, and just wanting to know more about it. But back then it was very sort of pigeonholed, and he was like, no, no, you just sit there and ring buyers. That's your job. Like, I value houses. So I guess I got a bit frustrated, and then by chance, the opportunity, a good friend of mine had bought an office close to Stockport, and he was like, I'm going to set up an estate agency. Do you want to be involved? So the two things just sort of collided a bit, really.
And so what level were you up to when you sort of went on your own? It sounds like you were sort of negotiator, senior negotiator sort of direction. So you weren't valuing properties at that point.
No, just sort of like negotiator level. So yeah, that's what I was doing, getting involved in the deals.
And did that feel like a big jump at the time? Because I can imagine that going from negotiator to sort of having your own business, even with a business partner to kind of run through, that being quite a jump.
Yeah, I was 23 at the time, and I'd not valued houses before. So there's a couple of dynamics of people saying like, you're too young, or all these type things. So yeah, it did feel like a big jump, but sort of quickly got used to it, and then obviously just absolutely love doing valuation. So it's something that I found my stride with.
So how cold was your launch? Because obviously you've gone out there and you've started a new estate agency business and brand. It's sort of a new name and sort of new to the town sort of thing. Did you have listings already when you've kind of had things lined up, or is it like kind of like, new name, new town, new everything? Talk me through that sort of those early days.
It was brand new, really. Literally, we're sort of slightly new area. It was just outside of where we both lived. So yeah, brand new brand. We were just in the office sort of 7 days a week. We didn't really have a huge marketing. Well, we didn't have any marketing budget, to be fair. So it was all very like shoe leather. Knocking on doors and introducing ourselves to local businesses. And at the time, a developer that we knew gave us a couple of houses to put in our window, and an estate agent in the next town over gave us a couple of houses to put in our window that he was struggling to sell. So, with our first sort of instructions, it then started to sort of snowball.
Hmm. And you kind of alluded to it slightly there, but what was kind of the main marketing method you went down? So obviously kind of, the shoe leather you mentioned there. Was it a case of, door knock until your finger drops off sort of thing? Or was it a case of, get the leaflets out? Or what was kind of the main marketing avenue you guys explored back then?
Leaflets and the newspaper really, as much as painful as it was to advertise in the newspaper, 'cause it was like 500 quid a week, I think it was back then. But that was where everyone looked for properties and looked for estate agents. So that was the one place. So we did a bit in the newspaper. But yeah, it was going to meet local business owners, going to the local pub quiz to try and get our faces known, should I say. Getting to meet, asking anyone that we knew that lived in that area, could we put a for sale board outside your house? And it was just sort of a very sort of slow and manual process, I guess, compared to today's world.
That's a tough gig networking and trying to get your business out there at the pub quiz. I mean, A, obviously you'd use your business name as your quiz name, but you don't want to win it because everyone hates you because you win it. But you don't want to lose it because everyone thinks you're stupid. So probably quite a fine line. You want to get like a second, third, fourth sort of a good runner up, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it was a bit of a tough gig that. Although one of my favourite things about doing that was there was another local agent, another independent in that same village, and in the pub quiz where they had where it was on, I went into the toilets and he'd had a sign made above the urinals saying "We won't take the piss on fees," and I remember thinking, "Oh mate, that's perfect for this area." So yeah, he sort of beat us to it a bit really.
And at what stage did you start to feel like the business was getting some real traction? When was the point where, because I appreciate when you first launch a business, you feel like you're running up a hill basically. You feel like you're putting like maximum effort in and sort of the return isn't exactly what you expect back from that sort of work. How many months, years, decades did you kind of feel before you think, okay, we're onto something here and sort of we're not chasing everybody and they're kind of coming to us slightly?
It happened pretty quickly in those very, very early years. We tried to do a few things differently. A friend of ours was a photographer, so we did like a little deal with him to take some pictures of the nicest houses that we put on, and that got the attention of people who had other nice houses in that area. So probably in that sort of, so we launched in 2005. So probably in that second half of 2006 into early part of 2007, we'd start to make a bit of a name for ourselves, and it started to feel like okay, we are onto something like you say. Our brand is starting to become known in this area. So in that respect, I would say a year from the cold launch to people ringing us for valuations rather than us have to go and ask them if they want one type thing.
And 20 years is a fair innings in the estate agency world. How have you seen sort of the focus on marketing change over that time? Because obviously you mentioned sort of newspapers, which, people listening now who are under the age of, I wouldn't like to guess, will probably go, what, estate agents used to advertise in the newspaper? You're like, yeah, and you paid a lot of money for it as well, sort of thing. So how have you seen that marketing sort of evolve over that timepiece?
It was really interesting. I remember the sort of when Rightmove first came out, and obviously in the estate agency world, it was a bit like, oh, this, what is this? This isn't going to work. And then and then people started to go on Rightmove, and it started to level the playing field between big and small companies. So people then started to come out of the newspaper and just focus on Rightmove. But again, that took a long time. Rightmove came about in the early 2000s, and people were still in the newspaper, probably still in the, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe even less. But then that then evolved again into the more personal side of our business, and again as social media started to gain a bit of a hold. I know Facebook was around in like the sort of 2006, 2007, but not really used commercially as such. And then so I think that the shift then went into social media in those sort of late teens, really from 2016, 17, 18, because social media was free, bar a little bit of equipment, and it allowed you to speak to a lot of people. It allowed you to speak to them personally, and that was probably for me that was probably the biggest evolution after Rightmove.
Mhm. And how easy did you find the transition from sort of that, what you call sort of legacy media-y, newspapery sort of stuff through to sort of the modern stuff? Were you one of these people that like rubbed your hands together and thought, amazing, I get to put my stuff on social media? Or you're like, what do you mean I take a picture of myself in front of a house? What was your sort of mindset back then?
I really embraced it, to be honest with you, because again, the newspapers, the cost of the newspaper really used to get to us because obviously it went out once a week. The chance of somebody seeing it was slim. There was always one vendor's property who wasn't in the paper, and then they're ringing you, kicking off on a Friday morning. And then it used to come out on a Thursday, and by Friday, it's, chip paper or whatever the saying is. So it used to get me that the marketing was just there for that for that one day and then gone. So I really loved the sort of advent of social media, to be honest with you. And we started a bit cautiously, I guess, with just sort of pictures of houses and some of our pictures that we're using for listings we used on social media, and that evolved into us speaking and the presenter led videos and that type of thing. But I was a big fan of it because I saw the difference it made in our business pretty quickly.
So bring me right up to date. Bring me up to 2025. I shouldn't mention the date in the podcast; it will age it terribly. So bring me up to 2025. Where are we up to now? Because obviously you're in a new chapter effectively. So talk me through what's going on.
So yeah, my business that I'd had for 20 years, I sold out to my business partner Rob, and started a brokerage business, Agent MXM, which has been going for about 3 months now. I've had a sort of keen eye on this sort of self-employed world for the last year or so, and I really like it. I think it's bringing out the best in a estate agency, and I wanted to give it a try. So I'm a bit all or nothing. So I thought, well, let's come out of that one and create this one. So yeah, currently in the self-employed space.
And what was the drive or the motivation there? Because I mean, I can imagine you've got a business there that you've spent the last, 2 decades growing to a really good level, consistent income and lettings portfolios and all these sort of thing. Yeah, people must go, oh, you're crazy, and for sort of not throwing that away, but kind of moving that away from yourself to then move into something completely brand new. So what was the sort of motivation there in that sort of direction?
Um, I suppose a combination of things really, but having had a business for 20 years, yes, I put a lot of work in over those 20 years, but it's a long time, from being sort of 23 to 43. So I love the business, the people in the business and everything about it, but I was just feeling like I'd been sat in that room for a long time, if you know what I mean. So it was time for a change of scenery, and to stay in the industry because again, I love the industry. So it was just that sort of the time was right for the change of scenery really, and that's sort of getting on the back of this huge growth in the self-employed world. Because I thought to myself, if I was going to do it, I wanted to be in there sort of now rather than maybe 5, 10 years down the line when there'd be a lot more competition for brokerages, I guess.
Cool. That makes perfect sense. And obviously, you're 3, 4 months down the line already. What's the biggest difference you've noticed between having sort of a traditional estate agency like you've had for the last couple of decades through to sort of having a self-employed brokerage networking sort of thing?
Um, the whole in the whole sort of self-employed space, not just in our business, I think there's a lot of collaboration between people. You see a lot of self-employed agents from all the different brokerages, commenting and liking each other's social media posts, which historically, estate agents wouldn't follow each other, on the high street, you wouldn't be seen dead liking a competitor's post. So that whole sort of collaboration thing, which I really like because I think that agents can work together. Yes, we're in competition, but the collaboration is really important. So I've seen that, and then plus the flexibility. Again, I think one thing that was accelerated during COVID was the whole sort of work-life balance, work from home type thing, and it just accelerated technology, and certainly in our industry. So I've seen people embracing that now, and one of our agents just spoke to her yesterday, and she'd been working in a local cafe all morning. Getting to know people in that area. So it's just that flexibility, I think, is the biggest difference.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. You do see a lot more collaboration. I'm researching one of my clients I'm starting working with this afternoon. I was going for their social media account in kind of preparation, and I was like, I recognize so many estate agents in your social media account that you don't work with. Like they're just other agents from other brokers in the area. Whereas, as you correctly say, back, a decade, 2 decades ago, sort of thing, wouldn't be seen dead with another agent in your town on your social media feed or anywhere near your advert or anything like that at all. That'd be kind of career suicide. So it is really great to see that coming forward. Why do you think that? Why now are so many agents thinking about going self-employed? Do you think what sort of? Obviously, you mentioned the COVID side of things, and people kind of readdressing that sort of angle. What else do you think is kind of pushing that sort of? I wouldn't call it a wave, but certainly a push in that direction of self-employedness.
I think again, probably sort of multiple things really. I think that the two biggest ones would be the earning potential. I know there's a big risk attached to it, of course, and when you set up, obviously you've got a period of time with no earnings, but the earning potential of somebody that is doing viewings on a Sunday afternoon on a property, knowing that if one of these people goes on to buy it, they're going to earn a few £1,000s further down the line. And the sort of barrier to entry insofar as when we set up our first business, it was very manual, whereas now to set up a business, if you can put yourself on social media, the algorithms are changing, aren't they? So you don't even need a lot of followers to get high views on Reels and TikTok and things like that. So these agents now can set up with a completely cold start and put themselves in front of 1,000 people, within a couple of weeks. So I think those two things are probably sort of driving it.
What do you think is the biggest mindset shift with regard to being, if someone's an employed agent today and they're kind of with a corporate like agent like you were a long time ago, and they're looking now to go self-employed, what's the biggest mind kind of shift you've got from that old position to kind of where they want to be in the future? What needs to change?
I think probably thinking longer term. I think, sort of beginning with the end in mind and thinking how they want to build their business over the course of the next maybe sort of 5 years, rather than this month's paycheck, this month's commission, because it is a longer term thing. Even as they're up and running, a state agency notoriously sort of peaks and troughs in terms of income. So some element of resilience and some element of thinking further down the line than maybe they have done in the past.
No, I completely agree. And I think the one thing I always find quite amazing actually when you do talk to self-employed agents and kind of say, what's your exit strategy and what's your plan for 5 years time, 10 years time sort of thing. And they're like, what do you mean exit strategy? I've only just started my business 10 minutes ago sort of thing. It's like, no, but at some point you're going to get to a point where you go, actually, I've had enough of doing viewings and valuations. Thank you very much. I want to take a step away. Now, does that look like you selling the business or does it look like you, just closing it down and sort of shrugging your shoulders and sort of walking away sort of thing? So I'm always surprised by the lack of agents who actually have sort of an exit strategy down the line they're kind of playing towards.
Yeah, a lot of businesses in general, I think, you sort of, when you set up in business, it's often the last thing on your mind. But again, that sort of starting with the end in mind is so important, I think, because that's the big goal. That's the sort of reason why, in a lot of respects, whether that's to buy yourself back more time in the future, whether it is to sell your business and go and retire somewhere. I think that thing has to be the driving force behind everything. So to have that forefront of your mind is really important, I think.
So you've had a couple of self-employed agents join yourself already, which is great to see. I think you kind of get one or so or one or two a month at the moment coming into business, which is super to see. What sort of messaging are you give them with regard to around finding their first properties instructions coming on the market? Because obviously you mentioned, 20 years ago it was shoe leather and it was all that sort of stuff you talked to back then. How has that changed from then, kind of what you had to do back then to kind of what you're telling them to do today?
There's still some element of shoe leather, to be fair. That's still valid to some extent. But now I think we're talking to them about the sort of the short-term wins and the long-term game. And the long-term game is building a social media profile and a personal brand. And the short term is starting to talk to people who are on the market, who've been on the market for a period of time, who maybe with a better marketing package, maybe with a tweaked price could do better. So it's starting to speak to those on the market properties whilst building your personal brand, and using your network. That saying your network is your net worth is so true. Like sending that WhatsApp broadcast message to everyone in your phone to say, hey, I'm an estate agent. Like, if you know anyone that's thinking of selling, that has yielded results. Just that message. So it's the short term stuff and the long term stuff in the background.
Absolutely. And I mean, I presume, do you have regular catch-ups with the agents when they come on board with yourself? Because I appreciate there's different degrees of support within the self-employed network. So I won't name names here, but some kind of self-employed brokerages are very much sort of like, it's almost like a cheap way of getting on Rightmove and Zoopla and a CRM system. Then sort of best of luck, see you at the Christmas party, fingers crossed. But other ones are sort of far more hands-on. So where do you kind of see yourself fitting in that sort of range?
We're in the hands-on, very much hands-on, probably too hands-on at the moment because we've not got many, so we've got the time to be. But we have the sort of individual check-in calls with the agent. We have what we call a morning brew call, which is 3 times a week, and it's a Teams call with everyone, Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning as a sort of catch-up. What's your plan for today? What have you been doing? What's been working? What's been not working? And actually going out with them and helping them, showing them how to film the walkthroughs and edit the videos and the social media. So at this point, it's very, very hands-on. I suspect that might decrease a little bit, but our intention is always to be there with them, sort of showing them how to do it.
As a person who's recently brought on sort of partner coaches to work with them in his own business, the number of times I've said to them, look, I really want to help you, I really want to support you, but I also don't want to be annoying and like naggy. So like if I don't quite walk that line correctly, just tell me to bugger off and I'll disappear sort of thing. But I really want you to do well and I just want to support you sort of thing. If I'm being too clingy, just let me know. So you probably have that same issue at the moment that I have.
Yeah, I should probably have that conversation, to be fair, because you're right.
Excellent. So Obviously, they're going to get up and running fairly shortly and kind of get their sort of instructions coming on. What's the sort of what's the long term goal? What's sort of the vision for the business in total?
So longer term, we'd love to grow it to around 200 agents. We want to see it. We want to really encourage this sort of collaboration between the agents. But yeah, our long term goal is to be quite a significant size agent.
And have you felt the sort of the mindset change? Because obviously, when you're on the front line of the estate agent side of things, it's very focused on your next instruction, selling the properties you've got, and you're almost like your job changes when you start a brokerage. I guess you're probably slightly more sort of recruitment focused now, along with selling houses as well. So sort of your priorities have changed slightly. How have you adjusted to that?
So yeah, so I'm not actually selling houses anymore myself, which I do miss actually. I'm a little bit gutted about, but that's probably another story. So yeah, the recruitment side of it, it's really interesting because it's sort of trying to reposition and reframe what you're posting on social media. Because prior to this, all of my message on social media is to encourage people to use me to sell their house, whereas now my message on social media is encouraging people to trust me to be part of our brokerage. So yeah, it's quite a difficult transition, should I say, to be fair.
I do find that lots of things overlap between many businesses. So, for example, I no longer have vendor updates, but I speak to my clients every week on the phone. So my vendor updates have just kind of turned into like client updates sort of thing, and sort of so certain things kind of just move over in the business. But it's all same sort of things, different names, but it's the same sort of idea. So where do you sit on non-experienced people coming in as a self-employed agent? So if I came to you and I said, Ian, love property, love houses. I've been I don't know, car salesman, whatever, for the last X amount of time. Would you just tell me to go away? Will we have a conversation about it? Where do you sit on sort of the self-employed people who haven't necessarily had historically experience starting up in that world?
Our door's open to the conversations with anyone with or without experience. And because for me, it's all about the person. When you meet somebody and you sat down opposite them and you're having a chat and you're thinking, would I trust this person to sell my house? That's the big question. And if you would, then I think you can sort of backfill the knowledge about estate agency. So, in an ideal world, yes, you want agents that have got some experience so that you're not starting from absolute ground zero. But having said that, I think that there are some amazing people out there coming across from different industries. One of our agents, Lauren, came from a background of being a virtual assistant, super organized, great at marketing, super on the ball. So she will transition really well into a state agency.
So when I was at the property franchise group some time ago, we used to have about a 50-50 split between experienced and non-experienced agents who were starting with ourselves. And actually, when you look at the figures after a year, you would find the non-experienced agents generally had a higher average fee than the experienced agents, which is completely counterintuitive what you think it might be. And the only thing I can think it might have been is that the agents who have experience have had it, banged into their head for the last X amount of years that fee is absolutely everything. Whereas the people who are sort of new to the industry sort of don't have that sort of baggage, let's call it, and just go, I just charge this because I think it's worth it. And they just ask the question and get the fee and sort of away they go. So I do think there are some advantages that do come from being a slightly more blank canvas in some situations.
Yeah, I agree. It's really interesting, that stat, isn't it? Because like you say, they've not got these limiting beliefs that have been drummed into us for years as estate agents that no one will pay that or you'll never get that fee. Like you say, if you're having the conversation with someone and say, we think your fee level should be this, they're saying, yeah, okay, great, that's my fee level, and off they go and they deliver it confidently. So yeah, really interesting, that stat.
It's when you get people say, "Oh, you never get that fee in my town." Well, people do.
Exactly.
So you alluded to personal brand earlier. So with the agents you're onboarding and coming to work with yourself, how important is personal brand, do you think, in today's estate agency bit world? And how are you making sure they grow their personal brand as quick as they possibly can do?
I think it's really important. If you look at some of the biggest personal brands in the world, in terms of sort of business people have got a higher following than the businesses they own. So this whole personal brand thing is massive. And if you dial that right down to what we're doing, for somebody to become quickly and easily recognised and known, it's for me, it's sort of a huge part of their launch. So we're helping them in terms of giving them ideas for content. We're actually supplying them with artwork for content, and we're talking through, anything that's, things like topical content. So the base rate change, not just a post to say the base rate's come down, a post about actually what impact does this have you if you're thinking of selling your house, or what impact does this have on the market. So we're helping them a lot with the content. And for me, it's one of the biggest things that we're discussing with them, which is, keep the sort of consistency on your social media.
And what would you say to somebody who came to you and said, I love selling houses, I love property, but I don't want to put my face on social media. I don't want to be on video. I don't like my voice. I don't like my hair. I don't like my teeth. I don't like my nose, whatever it may be. I don't want to put my face online. What would be the conversation you have with that person?
Interestingly, I actually had this conversation with somebody last week. The guy said, we sat down and we were talking, and I mentioned social media, and he was like, I absolutely hate social media. I'm not interested in it whatsoever. So I was like, okay. He's like, can you still do it? And my opinion is, it's still possible. Of course, it's still possible. However, it's just a much slower burn than having social media. So for me, I would put it up there with one of the main things that you should be doing. However, this guy was so against it that there wasn't, he was like, I'm never doing it. That's it. And maybe he might come around, but it's just a much slower process. And I think you're hamstringing yourself by not doing it, to be honest with you.
I will place a bet that everybody I've ever had a chat with who has always historically said, I hate social media, I hate my face, I hate going on camera, etc. As soon as they've got their first couple of videos under their belt, they are like off to the races. It's like they're like drunk on spring break or something. They're like out of the house and away we go sort of thing. And every other day they're posting and they love social media after that point. So I'm willing to bet that get them online, they'll turn a corner pretty quickly. So talk me through how you see the industry evolving over the next 5 to 10 years or so. What do you see as sort of the growth and the shrinkage? What do you see happening?
I mean, I guess obviously I'm going to say this, but I think the growth in the self-employed world, I think that's been apparent anyway for the last few years from the stats that are available. I think that'll play a huge part. Obviously, AI is now here, and being used in our industry to a greater or lesser extent by a lot of people. And I think AI, there's a bit of a divide on AI, isn't there, as to whether you should use it for, things like booking views and taking inquiries or not. But I think that AI will play a bigger part in the administration of our businesses, not necessarily the sort of front end things. And I think there'll be more of this personal brand thing. I really do. I think that it won't be long before maybe some of the bigger sort of corporate companies start to encourage personal branding at branch level for their businesses, because I think if they did that, they would have a great coverage of the whole market. They'd have the sort of national brand and then the sort of micro level recognition. So I think that there's still a lot of growth in social media, for being honest with you. I think there's still a lot of people that aren't doing it, but I think that will be the thing over the next few years that's going to have the biggest impact on estate agency businesses.
Do you feel that if the corporate agents went into that world and they said, okay, guys, we're going to lift the embargo and you can actually have a social media profile and you can actually kind of get in front of camera and whatever it may be, do you think that there would be an influx of self-employed agents leaving those corporate businesses in about 6 months' time? Because they would have grown their own personal brand. People would go, I always work with Bob. Bob's great. Bob's fantastic. Oh, Bob's now changed to start his own brokerage and start for, link up with so-and-so company. And therefore they'll just go to him. So do you think they kind of a little bit of paranoia there that would happen down the line?
Possibly, because I think if people did build a personal brand under their brand, then yes. But I guess those people that have got the sort of attitude that they would go into the self-employed world will possibly do that anyway. But yeah, I get it. Those sort of big corporate bosses probably thinking, well, we can't just sort of help everyone build their brand to leave us in a few years. But I think if they don't do it, I think they're missing a trick, to be fair.
So final question for yourself. What advice would you give someone listening today who is looking to start their own self-employed estate agency business in 2025?
I think that the big one is begin with the end in mind, and know what you want from it in the future. I would say don't be afraid to put your face out there, because as you've said, once you've done your first couple of videos, your friends stop messaging you, taking the mic, and people just react really positively to it. And again, something that I think you posted recently, might have even been today, about this sort of this balance thing of managing your time, because it's easy to fall into that working 7 days a week and taking calls at 10 o'clock at night. I would, as much as you're keen for business and as much as you want to impress people, I would set boundaries as to when you are and aren't available, because that is the quickest path to then people expecting you to answer your phone at 11:30 at night, which I had a missed call of someone at 11:30 at night a couple of years ago. So I've been there. So they would be the things for me.
You think, oh, I'm going to add another question on there. So this is kind of like final question plus one. Do you think there's a change in mindset? Because I think going back a couple of years ago, there was kind of like a, yeah, we're on the grind, we're on the hustle, we're working 24/7 and call me whenever you like and answer the call sort of thing. Do you think there's kind of a little bit of a push away from that these days to get that actually like, yeah, between 8:30 and 6 o'clock, I'm going to work my socks off and work really hard and work on a Saturday. But actually, if someone came to me today and said, Chris, I'm available 24/7, I would go, no, you're not. Like you're just not like, at 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock, whatever it may be, 8 o'clock, whatever the time is, put your time on that. So do you think people are kind of pushing away from that grind mentality, hustle mentality, and kind of going to more of a sort of a realistic sort of balance mentality on it?
Yeah, I think so. When we first started, it was, like you say, it was that badge of honor that we work 7 days a week and we're in the office till whatever time at night. And you told people that's what you did. Whereas in reality, our sort of productivity was probably through the floor after about 2 weeks because you've been there every day. So I think there's so much more now in the press and the media about sort of mental health, physical health, looking after yourself. So yeah, I think that these sort of 100-hour weeks that people are posting, you see much less of it. And now to fair, probably almost the other way, seeing posts of people picture at the kids' sports day or those sort of things that they've actually took the time out to do that. So yes, I think people are recognizing that it's not, you're not a superhero because you worked 100 hours a week. You're probably a superhero if you've worked 50 hours a week and smashed it in those hours and still done all the things you wanted to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Ian, you've been a brilliant guest. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all. Thanks, Chris.